back. If you're new here, I'm Tamara, and today I'll be sitting down with DaniMarie, a fellow person with albinism, to talk about what school is like. My video is going to talk about early education, so elementary through high school, and hers is going to talk about post-secondary or university. So I'll let Dani introduce herself.
Hello, I'm DaniMarie AUC, and I'm the creator of Albinism Up Close. Albinism Up Close is the project that seeks to spread awareness for albinism, its related conditions, and blindness. And one goal of Albinism Up Close is to showcase some of the diversity within the albinism and blindness communities. And you can learn more about this project on albinismupclose.com. My YouTube channel, DaniMarie AUC, is all about lifestyle from my perspective as a person with albinism and a person who is legally blind. You can find general information, tips and tricks, and so much more as my channel grows. After you finish watching this video, make sure to hop over to my channel and watch part 2.
Let's jump straight in with some questions. When were you diagnosed? Because for most people, when you're diagnosed indicates when you're going to have any kind of accommodations in school.
As soon as I was born, my family and the doctor knew that I had albinism because they're all very brown or black haired. And I was born extremely pale and with a full head of white hair. I was formally diagnosed by an ophthalmologist around the age of 9 months old. And this one wasn't a fun experience for my mom because she was basically told by this doctor that, oh, your daughter's gonna be blind, she's gonna be helpless, and you're just gonna have to be taking care of her the rest of your life. I cannot imagine being told that about your child. But who's laughing now?
For me, I was formally diagnosed in kindergarten, but prior to that diagnosis, my teachers believed that I had a serious learning disability and ADHD. So they weren't entirely correct. They couldn't figure out why I wasn't paying attention, but the biggest part of the problem was because of my blindness. So tell me, did you attend any kind of school program, camp, or other specialized activity for people with visual impairments or blindness?
I did attend a preschool before kindergarten that was for kids with disabilities. And I think it was about 3 days a week. They evaluated my educational abilities and generally saw what kind of tools and things I would need as I progressed into kindergarten and on further. I remember getting to tour the cafeteria and a kindergarten classroom so that I could understand what a day in kindergarten would be like and so that they could figure out what it was that I would need going forward.
My experience is very different from most like yours. I did not attend many camps or any special blind schools. I was in mainstream education all the way through, so I didn't really get to experience a lot of blind culture and the blind community until I was out of high school. When did you get your first vision aids and what were they?
I remember having vision aids in 3rd and 4th grade. I don't remember exactly when I got them, but it had to be somewhere between kindergarten and there. The main ones I used were a dome magnifier, a monocular, other handheld magnifiers, and large print books. The dome magnifier was something that really fascinated my classmates and my friends, but I struggled to use that one because it was so big, but it only showed me just this small amount of text on the paper, and I think that was very frustrating. It kind of got in the way in essence. The monocular is something I struggled with as well. Now, I struggled with it because every time I looked through the monocular, it's like I would have the tiniest hole to focus through, and it seemed like it would shift, and I don't know if this was because my nystagmus was really bad, it wasn't the right size monocular for me maybe, or maybe it was a cheaply made monocular. Today I swear by monoculars. I actually own 2 and I don't go anywhere without a monocular. But other than that, I also tried various handheld magnifiers, including like a magnifying glass, a lit magnifying glass, the bar style magnifier that was to magnify a line of text at a time, and a page magnifier. Most of these I struggled to use. Some of them I could tell they magnified the page a little bit, but it never seemed like it was enough to really help speed up my reading, because I read a lot in elementary, middle school, and in high school. I'm a huge reader. I love reading. The last thing are those giant print textbooks. So for those of you today who are in school, you do not have to deal with the giant beast that is large print textbooks. So these things, when I say large, the book would be like this wide and like this tall. Now I'm remembering this from 4th or 5th grade, so maybe it wasn't quite that big, but it was so heavy and so big, it barely fit on a desk. And I still had to get very close to read it. So me getting very close to the very top of the page was a bit like a contortionist act. So I'd lean forward, look down, and try not to ram the book into my stomach. So they were a challenge, honestly. They were wonderful for the time. That was what we had. So it was great. But what can you do?
So I think, like most people in the albinism community, we start with things like monoculars, which are essentially single lens binoculars. That never really worked for me. I had dome magnifiers, so it was just a very large glass dome that was a magnifier. I also had a CCTV, or closed circuit TV, which enlarged print off books. None of those worked long term for me, so I ended up navigating more towards learning Braille and using a Perkins Brailler and using that as my main mode of communication. And then technology once it was more mainstream in high school. Did you receive any orientation and mobility, O&M, or mobility type training in your early education years?
So the only O&M training I remember receiving as a young kid was how to use a monocular outside. And it was little things like, make sure to turn your head when you look and not your whole body, or something like that. Honestly, it was so long ago, I hardly remember it. I never knew that using a white cane was even an option for me. I did go to a summer camp for the blind one year. It was a 2-week camp, and I need to do a whole video on that because it was a very interesting 2 weeks. So almost everyone there used a white cane, but for some reason it didn't click with me, and I was about, oh gosh, I might have been 8, I'm not really sure. I was really young, so it didn't click with me that I could use a white cane, that that's something that would benefit me, because I thought all these people were, totally blind too, because, I mean, that's the stereotype, right? It is, and honestly, even some of us among the visually impaired and blind communities have misconceptions. So I had a good time at that camp, and when I went home, it was a bit like it never happened. Things just went back to normal, and I didn't learn to use a white cane until I was about 18. And I'm still waiting on formal O&M training, so that's coming up soon.
My experience was very different. I did have a lot of intensive O&M. My eye doctors and my teachers weren't sure how long my vision would last at that point, so they were very, very concerned in getting me as many kind of interventions early on as possible. So I did have intensive O&M, and I credit that early training in making me confident crossing streets, being able to do things as independently as I do now. What kind of adaptations were put in place in your classroom, i.e. learning Braille, using large print, changing the lighting to help your specific needs?
In elementary school, so much of the early work and worksheets and papers we would use was already pretty large, so I don't remember having a lot of super enlarged print at that point, but as we went up in grade and the print gradually got smaller, I did get handouts that were enlarged for me so that I could use them. I don't remember any kind of light adaptations, though that would have been so helpful for my photophobia. There was just so much I didn't know when I was in elementary school, and I think there was so much that my parents didn't know either, and I mean also the teachers. Just more education is so easy to access now than it was back then. It's incredible the difference it makes.
My experience is probably the polar opposite to that. I had every adaptation. I started with large print. When that was clearly not working, I was transitioned early into reading Braille. It wasn't initially intended as something that I needed to do permanently, only when my eyes got tired, but it did become necessary as the course curriculum became more and more intensive and my vision got worse and worse, that I transitioned full-time into Braille. I started learning typing very early on, so I'm a touch typer. That really helped me transition nicely when I got into high school, and I had a one-on-one aide in the classroom at all times to help me learn those types of materials that I couldn't get visually. What would you say is the most important thing to tell parents or students going through a primary education right now?
So for parents, the biggest thing I recommend is just to advocate for your kids and educate yourselves. You have this wealth of knowledge out there on the internet, including YouTube videos like these and so much more, that you can learn what's out there so easily. So learn the things that are available, learn the regulations, learn the laws, whatever they may be in your country. Now in the USA, we have two big options in public schools. So first is the IEP, the Individualized Education Program. This is a government mandated program, and to get your child into something like this, your child will need to meet qualifications for special education. Now, what that's going to mean for most of you out there is that you get a letter or a form from your ophthalmologist or your optometrist just stating that your child is legally blind or visually impaired and their life is significantly impacted by this and they would benefit from special education. So you shouldn't have any trouble meeting that qualification. So what an IEP does is basically it's going to help you lay out a plan to get your child the accommodations that he or she needs, and to make sure that he or she is meeting their goals, to make sure the school does what it's supposed to, and just generally it's going to be your contract that says, this is our plan, so now you guys have to stick to it. So because the IEP is so regulated, they also regulate who is on the IEP team. So the team normally will include the parent or guardian, a regular school teacher, a special education teacher, a special education supervisor, and also someone like a school counselor who can interpret any kind of evaluations you have. Now, the IEP is also going to allow you to get an individual education evaluation outside of the school at no charge to the family. So you'll be able to get an outside person, a counselor, an education specialist, something to do this evaluation of your child to help you learn what it is specifically that they're going to need. And like I said, that's going to be at no cost to the parents. So the other option that I mentioned is called a 504 plan. These are less formal, they're easier to get, so you don't need to qualify as a special education student, but they also don't have to be like a written contract. They can be a verbal plan. They're more like a guideline. So this kind of plan would be for someone who needed very few accommodations. So they allow the child to work with his or her peers and help the school to remove the barriers that may keep your child from succeeding. Now in the USA, generally the recommendation is to get an IEP because it's regulated. You will make sure that you're able to get all the accommodations that your child needs. And that's going to be my recommendation as well. When I was in school, there was no prevalence of the internet and all these accommodations that were available. Like, we just didn't know. But I did have an IEP plan, and it did benefit me. It did help me to get the things I needed that we knew about, and it did help me succeed. I was a very successful student.
For me, I would say advocacy is number one. Teach your child advocacy. If you are a student, advocate for yourself. Tell teachers, parents, whoever, what your needs are. If you're a parent, stand up for your child and your student. They need your help, because without strong early intervention, it's going to be really, really difficult to succeed and to be able to live independently and be successful when it comes to education. It does take a village of people, and you won't always have the accommodations. Don't be afraid to change schools if it's not working for you. What tools did you use in secondary school in terms of adaptation?
In secondary school, I didn't use a lot of tools, honestly. I learned to listen very well and take notes that way. I sat near the front of the board so that there was a chance I could see some of the things going on. And generally, I was very lucky to have good friends. My friends helped me so much more than they needed to. They gave me their notes. They would read things to me that was being written on the board. And I honestly still appreciate that to this day, and it's been 10 plus years. So thanks, guys.
For me, by the time I got into secondary school, large print was no longer an option for me, so I was full-time Braille. I was using a Braille Lite, which is essentially a mini Braille computer. I was doing full-time Braille reading. I was using a Perkins Brailler. And then by the end of junior high school, I was transitioning into using a laptop full-time and more Braille type things for math and science related courses. What type of school did you attend and how big was it?
I attended public school. It was a very small rural school, and everybody pretty much knew everybody, so that probably helped me out a lot. I think people were generally very helpful, and they generally knew who I was and could recognize me, so that was good. By the time I graduated, there were about 65 people in my graduating class at high school, so it was a pretty small public school.
For me, I attended a very large school, whether it was elementary, junior, or high school. They were public mainstream education. I think my high school had around 3,000 students, so I was just one among many. Did you experience any kind of bullying or discrimination because of your visual impairment, or because you look different because of your albinism?
I was bullied very infrequently, so it didn't affect a lot of my daily life. But things that I did experience were, I got called albino a few times in a very derogative way. I got called Casper quite a lot. Casper the Friendly Ghost. For those of you who don't know, that's a movie about a ghost. But I also had pretty severe acne in high school, so I got bullied a little bit for that as well. And probably no more than most people. I generally handled my bullying head on. I would make snide remarks right back, or honestly, I would just ignore it, because generally it's just not worth an argument. It's not worth a fight. It's not worth the stress it's going to cause me to try and come up with something to say to someone who probably isn't interested in hearing what I have to say anyway. So I was also very lucky that I had very good friends who loved me for who I was, and they accepted me, and anytime someone would say something about me negatively when I wasn't around, I know they definitely would stand up for me and set people right. It means a lot to have good friends like that, especially when you're different and you're in high school.
I certainly did get bullied my entire way through high school. I think the biggest thing to remember is that you will make it out the other side. You are a stronger person. You can get through it. I didn't have a lot of success when I talked to adults, when I brought it to my parents' attention. My friends tried to defend me as much as they could, but it didn't really stop it from happening. So my advice would be to just try and think about what the next steps are. How are you thinking about moving forward? And if you're safe, just try and ignore it as best you can. What is your advice for students in high school now?
For those of you in high school now, in terms of bullying, try to educate when you can. And when you can't, walk away with your head held high, because I know it doesn't feel like it now, but high school is temporary. That is 4 years of your long, beautiful life. That is just seconds in the scheme of things. So no one knows who they are in high school. No one. You got the rest of your life to figure that out, and I promise you will. And it'll be glorious.
My advice to a high school student is to have a plan, but to expect that plan to change. It's okay to want to do one thing and then change your mind 15 minutes later. You don't have to decide what you want to be when you grow up right at 18. Try things out, decide you don't like them, and try something new. Try and figure out as many ways as possible that you can become self-sufficient. whether that's creating side hustles. Create things that are going to bring you opportunities and try and meet as many new people as possible. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hoped it helped clear up some of the things that many of us who are visually impaired or blind go through in school. It's clear that we have a vast array of experiences, and that all depends on where we're from and what's going on and who's advocating on our behalf. I am a true advocate for huge intervention early on, and whether it's necessary or not, learning all of the skills possible to make sure that you have the ability to be independent. If you enjoyed this video, if you want to check out more, please check out the links in the description. Watch part 2 of DaniMarie's video. If you want to hang out with me more, I have a Twitch stream every Friday and Sunday night at 7:30 Mountain Standard Time, and I have new videos coming out every Wednesday, so be sure to check those out. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.